Hi.
Hi!
I'm not sure which direction to look.
Everywhere. Encompass everybody. Bring
I'll
them
turn-
to your
I'll turn
knowledgeable
slightly.
bosom and share your wealth of knowledge. You said to me earlier on that you are feeling very jet lagged. Where have you been?
Oh, I've actually just been in Santa Monica, in Los Angeles, and feeling jet lag from there is no excuse because I go there every month. But I don't know what it is, like three. It's this winter,
Yeah.
right? It's that summer winter thing, right? It's like suddenly coming back to proper Auckland winter. It's like
It's
knocked me for six.
It's moist in all the wrong places at the moment, isn't it? I've just come back up from Queenstown, so this is quite balmy for me.
Right.
Very, very chilly down there. And you spend most of you split your time between here and California. Before we get into absolutely everything, I do want to know, where do you prefer?
Well, I really like Auckland. I mean, I think that Auckland's I've chosen to live in Auckland. I mean, it's kind of a conscious choice, and I think that Auckland's a very cool town. It's got a pretty good business scene, but it's also got it's a great place to have kids and get into the outdoors and all that sort of stuff. I like California too, though. I mean, it's interesting. When we were before we were acquired, we were based in Northern California, in the Bay Area, and the Bay Area has a certain charm. It's got this mixture of the kind of entrepreneurialism, which it's really been the engine of a lot of growth in the US economy for a long time, and then it's sort of kind of tied to this history of the counterculture revolution and all these sorts of things, and then it's very quickly, I think people don't realise you can go from this kind of arty urban environment in San Francisco out into the wilderness within 20 minutes. It's that kind of place,
just like
right?
Auckland, then.
Yeah, it is really similar. We were based in Sausalito.
You're in Henderson, and that's like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, it's interesting because our office was kind of in the Henderson of San Francisco.
Oh my God, dude!
But it is one of those things. It's like I think that if you have to split your time between two places, California and Auckland are pretty good places to split it. Yeah.
All right, let's start it off with a bit of an elevator pitch. I do a pretty good job of introducing people, but
That's amazing.
It's written down for me. I don't do any of this writing, so if you guys thought that was crap, it's her fault. Thanks, Michaela. But give me 45 seconds to a minute of who Mike Carden actually is. Go. No pressure.
So look, I guess that I'm most well known for founding Sonar 6, which was a human resources software as a service business. We grew that for 6 years. That was acquired by Cornerstone OnDemand, which was a large software as a service player, one of the 10 largest software as a service vendors in the world. Worked there for the last 2 years. Learned a lot in those 2 years, in fact, about how you grow. Sitting on the leadership group of a NASDAQ listed company and kind of understanding how that cadence works. Before that, like your pitch said, I came from a background of computer science. I'm kind of an engineer, but I think I figured out fairly quickly when I started work that the sales and marketing guys were driving better cars, and so I kind of switched careers. Of course, that was in the early '90s, and now it's the opposite. The engineers are driving the good cars. So sometime I shift backwards and forwards between those two mindsets of sales and marketing and engineering.
Okay, one of the questions from these guys that constantly arose was, how on earth do you go between being an expert in software and artificial intelligence to marketing? Was it really all about driving the flasher car?
It was. Look. I think I made the shift very, very early in my career. So I went to university, and I went to university when I was very young, and
Were you a girly swat?
Possibly. And so what happened there is when I went to university, I got into this. I was interested in computers because it was like, 1987 or something, and we had a Commodore 64 at home, and I was like, that's kind of.
I wanted an Atari ST.
Well, there you go, right? And so I wanted to. I thought, well, I kind of like computers, and so I did computer stuff at university, and then. I left university and I got a job in sort of tech support. It was like the sort of job you got when you left university with a computer science degree in 1990. And working in tech support's it's an okay career, but it's not like great. And so I sort of somehow drifted into sales and marketing, and then I sort of forgot about writing code and doing that stuff for a long time. And then sometime in the early 2000s, I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to actually go back and I'm going to start a business, and I really wanted to start a tech business. And I think if you're going to do a tech business, you want you want to understand the technology. So I thought, I'll just get back into coding. And in the intervening 15 years or so,
things had changed.
Yeah,
somewhat.
quite a lot of stuff had changed. So I don't know if anyone here kind of writes code, but like object orientation didn't exist when I was like, when I went to university. So it's like you come around and you go, okay, I can just write some code now. And wow, the whole way we write code's completely changed. And the other thing that didn't exist was the internet. And that kind of changed a lot of stuff as well. So, but it's quite cool. It's quite cool reinserting yourself into kind of software engineering.
Do you still do that now? I mean, we all understand that life is a constant learning curve. But have you rested on your laurels? Or do you still find yourself thinking, I wonder how that works, and you take it apart?
I think there's a certain joy in writing code. For me, not for everyone.
Okay, so
but there is. No, I like it. It's got its sort of element. It's like solving a Sudoku puzzle, It's kind of like you're trying to solve something and do that. But at the same time, if you kind of get stuck into that and you're just doing that every day, you kind of can become a kind of unsociable animal.
Yeah.
And that probably doesn't suit me. And so I think that, at the beginning of Sonar 6, I wrote code on the product. It's still in the product that, that hundreds of thousands of people now use, which is a little scary.
Does that blow your mind?
It's weird.
That you were sitting at a desk at one point, typey, and now there are hundreds of thousands of people using that particular that one. Maybe that's one line of code.
It doesn't really blow my mind, to be honest. I mean, this is the feature of writing software is you want people to use it, right? I think that's something you do realise. It's one of the cool things about we've taken a lot of developers who've come from agencies where they'll work on some little project for a little while and they'll do that. But actually working on something where you're actually going to have really big numbers of users using it is actually quite gratifying.
Yeah.
But now I sort of drifted out of writing code. I haven't written any for a while. I do a bit of my son's 12 now and my daughter's 10, and so I'm trying to teach them to write code. So we're creating the girl's less excited than the boy, but we're trying to create games in Unity and things like that. Yeah, and it's like writing code's not particularly difficult. It's just like everyone has this mindset it's going to be difficult, but it's actually it gets easier and easier every year.
Said the man who's considered an expert in it. For me, I'm like, I don't even know how to reboot. Sonar 6, where did this idea come from? Did you see a gap in the market? Was it something that you'd heard people bitching and moaning and thought, I can make something that will make a difference? Or did you think, well, that's going to get me a fast, shiny car? Yeah,
it's an interesting thing, that, isn't it? I think that like everyone, when they have these kind of conversations, they always kind of post-rationalise stuff. They always sort of make out that their decisions were made through thought rather than chance. And the reality of it is, it's funny, I get involved in these conversations where people are asking for advice and things and so on, and most advice is just nostalgia. It's like, most of the big decisions that I've made in my life were just made out of necessity, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so sort of there's different versions of the story. There's different sort of creation myths for Sonar 6.
What's the biggest myth out there? What's the Sonar 6 legend?
Oh, look. Early on, we hired a PR company who actually came up with one for us, which retrospectively just seems so weird, doesn't it?
People.
Yeah. But one of our investors was Sam Morgan, and there's a story around Trade Me, which is that he was sitting in Wellington, he was cold, and he wanted to buy a heater, and he couldn't buy one online, and so he invented Trade Me. And that's the story that kind of the Dom Post ran at the time when Trade Me was acquired for $700 million or something. And that story was made up 2 days before that article went to press, as far as I know. I mean, Sam will probably tell me otherwise. But I think we have a story which is that I was leaving the corporation I was working for previously, and it was one of these corporations where the CEO would be kind of like, hand on heart, people are our most important asset. And the reality of it was that we knew nothing about that asset. And the example that I gave was that, when I was leaving, I was involved in trying to find a successor for my role. And, I talked to the usual suspects. I talked to HR, I talked to other managers, and said, is there someone with the kind of requisite skills and capability to do my role? No, we couldn't find anyone. So we went to a search company, and 6 weeks later, I met exactly the right person for the company, to take my role, and I met her in the elevator in our building in Singapore. She already worked for us, right? And just sort of, so we sit here going, people are our most important asset. We don't know anything about them, and whereas we knew where every pocket calculator was, or you didn't find piles of cash sitting in the elevator. So that's the story, but it's entirely made up.
I was getting really, I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's a good story, hey? But the actual reality of it is that we just sat there, me and a buddy one day, a guy called Mark Hallier, and we said, let's build some software. And we sort of looked at human resources. We looked at other areas, and we looked at human resources. And in human resources, it was interesting. I'm a big believer in this idea of going after obvious pain points and going after big markets. I think it's something that in New Zealand we're actually generally not always that good at. We looked at sort of the human resources space, and we looked at performance reviews quite specifically. And performance reviews, employee performance reviews just sounds like the most boring place to start a business, right? But the reality of it is there's 1.5 billion people in the world who do an annual performance review. And of those 1.5 billion people, like most of them are unhappy. Is anyone in this room do a performance review? Like is that a fun time? Is that like good? Right? So you've got this sort of thing. It's like boring. It's painful. My managers are and we said, hey, we can kind of fix that. And if you can fix that for 1.5 billion people, like I know we just did the maths and see if you can monetize that to $20 per person per year, you've got a total available market of $30 billion. Let's go after that. And so that was,
I'm
that
motivated.
was kind of
So you guys motivated, totally motivated.
Level of thinking in it. But that's the way you should think about it. I mean, if you're starting a business, you should try and go after big problems where there's actually a real pain point and there's a big market, right? Like rather than just chasing a technology which you think is a kind of fun technology. There's nothing that fun about building human resources technology.
You look like you've had a very exciting time of late. Very exciting. So, something that you and I discussed a little bit earlier on was about recognising good business opportunities. And so you sat back and you looked at the fact that there's 1.5 billion people all doing these performance reviews. What really was the process behind that? Did you look at anything else to apply your software knowledge to?
Yeah, we looked at a few things. We actually, it came down in the end between online, mobile gambling and human resources. And we chose human resources, which I regret. But I probably would have had a very different life, wouldn't I? It's like a sliding doors scenario. I wonder if there's like a Mike in a parallel universe who went off and built mobile gaming, not gaming, mobile gambling. So look, we did look at different things, and I think that we just came down to this idea of, like I said, there's a big market. I mean, my sort of rules on looking at businesses, and I talk to lots of businesses, lots of startup businesses all the time, and it's kind of the thing that I'm interested in at the moment. And really, there's sort of four things I look at, and the first one is, are they going after a pain point that is obvious? Are you going after something where you can actually explain to people what it is, that it's actually a problem that people have that needs to be solved? It's someone said to me once, it's like you've got to have a business where you can describe what you're doing. If you rode it on the side of a bus and the bus drove past, someone would be able to know what you did and the time that it takes the bus to go past. And in Sonar 6, our tagline was, "At last, performance reviews that don't suck." People understood what we did. You'd go to a barbecue and you could say to someone, "Hey, does your company do performance reviews?" And they go, "Oh, yeah. Is it good?" And they go, "Oh, no, it's broken." And we go, "Oh, yeah, we can fix that."
Yeah.
You kind of had a business that was real because you had a pain point that was easy to explain. And then the second thing I always think is you've got to go after big markets. People talk about the valuation of Xero, and I know the valuation of Xero has been doing this a bit recently, but the reality of it is the reason that Xero is so valuable, a lot of that is because it's going after all of accounting. And all of accounting is a really big thing to go after. And I talked to a business just recently, and you look at their total available market. If they make a product that adds on to another product, and you kind of do the investigation, you look at it and go like, well, the most you're ever going to sell of this is 20,000 units if you get the entire market.
And then what?
Yeah, that's just not worth going after. And it is funny because if you're trying to build a growth business, the businesses that people like to invest in, the businesses that do well, are the ones that seem to have unlimited growth potential, right? So big markets kind of imply that. It's funny because someone from a company called Frost & Sullivan, who are a very well-known company that do work for the NZTE on, management consulting, came and talked to us early on, and they gave us some really valuable feedback. But amongst that feedback, they said, "Hey, look, part of what you're doing here is you're trying to go after all of human resources. You're trying to go after all performance reviews all over the world. You're a New Zealand company, you really should find a niche. So why don't you just go after legal firms or something like that?" And that to me is just the problem with a lot of New Zealand firms. It's like we have this mentality that says, hey, we're New Zealanders, so we should go after a niche, which is just bullshit. We're in New Zealand, so we should go after the biggest possible market we can kind of get after, right?
Has that been one of the biggest stumbling blocks that you've come across, having advice from people that you really do want to have the opinion of? And do you feel that at any point that you've
I mean,
been
the
held
reality
back by
is
those
if you
opinions?
start taking advice from management consultants, you're probably in trouble to start with, right? So, and like I said before, most advice is just nostalgia. I actually think that is a line from the Sunscreen song, incidentally, by Baz Luhrmann. It's really useful to get lots of people's opinions, right? I think it's just useful. That's why people build boards. That's why people build advisory boards. That's why people talk to lots of people, and that's cool. At the same time, though, you're kind of rowing your own boat, right? Ultimately, I normally think that one person's idea is often better than the sort of combined efforts of lots of people, where you sort of end up diluting each other's ideas rather than kind of having one solid idea. There's a quote, and I think it's Winston Churchill, but it probably isn't.
It's probably the Sunscreen song.
Yeah, it could be Baz Luhrmann. And that is that if you go to a park, you don't see statues of committees, right? You don't see statues of groups of people in the park. You see statues of individual people, and I think that's probably the case. People with undiluted visions often are the people who change the world.
Yeah, so stick basically true to what you've thought of in the first place. What was the hardest thing in building Sonar 6?
Well, what was the hardest thing? Like building any business is relentless. Anyone in this room who builds a business knows the relentless nature of it. The weird thing is that when we started, we were trying to build a product. So me and Mark were sitting there trying to build a product, and then we had John involved who was trying to sell the product, and we were trying to get something out the door. And it sort of seemed tough because we were working hard and we were running out of money, and we were trying to build the product. But my God, that was nowhere near as tough as once we had a product in the marketplace and suddenly we had customers. And the product was first generation, so it didn't work as well as we'd maybe like. And now suddenly you've got customers, and so man, that's like really tough. Now we've got customers. But it's okay. Once we get customers, the business will smooth out. We'll get another version. It'll be better. And then now suddenly we've got staff, right? We've got lots and lots of staff. And my God, the staff problems are, and it's relentless, right? There's no sort of point where you suddenly go, oh yeah, okay, I can just chill now. Everything's working fine.
Not even when you were acquired by.
Well, not really, because once we were acquired, we had to integrate this big team of people we'd brought into our acquiring company. We'd made a commitment to stay with the acquiring company, and the acquiring company was very confident in the business model we'd been building. And so what Cornerstone wanted to do is they wanted to accelerate things, which is exactly is cool. So where we'd been spending maybe $500,000 on marketing, maybe they wanted to spend $2 million on marketing. So they just wanted to put their foot on the accelerator because we had a proven business model. And so, so there was a lot of challenges involved in that as well. And so don't get me wrong, that it's not enjoyable stuff. It's enjoyable. It's just relentless, right? It's just like just goes on and on and on.
Where did the money come from in the first place? I mean, you guys were sitting down writing code for God knows how long before you actually took it to market. What kept you financially buoyant during that time? Did you find investors?
So Mark, who I worked with, worked as a prostitute. So
I basically subleased my corner on K Road to him. I remember that.
Yeah, I'm just saying that in case he watches the video. He'd be a hopeless prostitute. So what we did is Mark and I worked for about a year and a half, kind of part time on it. So writing code and then just trying to do some other work and just doing whatever gig we could to kind of so that we could kind of work sort of 30 to 40 hours on Sonar 6 and sort of 20 hours on other things. And just sort of try and keep that together, and that lasted for about sort of a year, and then we at that point we started to raise money. We raised $400K, I think, off Sam Morgan, and so Sam came on board, and then we kind of got more professional really, and then after that, we didn't raise a whole lot of money over the whole lifetime of the business. We maybe raised $3 million or something in a few rounds. We hit the GFC fairly soon after we started. So if you want to kind of, if you want to separate the men from the boys, it's always good to go into a financial crisis. It really does kind of, it forces you to make some decisions. But it really was the shaping of the business as well. It really was like, we didn't get the sort of luxury of, there's a real frothy market at the moment for startups, so you can raise money, and when you raise money, you go, I can think of ways to spend it. I guess that, we were in this mode of going, hey, if we run out of the money we've got here, we're actually not going to be able to raise any more. That's what it felt like. This is what the GFC really felt like. It's like, shit, if we run out of this money, we're not going to be able to raise any more. And that gives you a sense of urgency, which is quite good. It kind of forces you into this mode of going, hey, if if we don't get customers, we can't just go back to our register and ask for more money. We're just going to have to get customers.
Yeah, this is a theme that crops up over and over again during startup grinds, which is just get on and do it. Don't doubt yourself. Go out there and get those paying customers. Make it work.
Yeah.
Otherwise, well.
Well, yeah, I mean, a software company without customers is just a hobby, really, right? And that's like, I mean, anyone can have a hobby, but if you get to a point where, your children aren't going to be able to eat unless you turn that hobby into a business, you're probably more likely to be successful. And you certainly see that a lot with people who, who maybe get made redundant from telecom at, a certain age, and they go, okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go off and I'm going to, start a business because I've paid off my mortgage and I've got $300K in the bank, and and they just sort of drift into this business and they don't really have any sort of thing that says to them, shit, you actually have to get customers and turn this into paying customers quickly. Not to say that people who get made redundant from telecom can't build great businesses. There's actually quite a few good examples of that. But I'm just mean that you can actually, if you've paid off your mortgage and you're in that space and you're comfortable, ostensibly it could be harder. You might be more confident, it might be easier, God, what do I know?
Well, hopefully quite a lot, because this is why these guys are here right now. Let's just take it back a little bit further. Tell us about where you grew up, and you said you went to university really early, and I asked you if it's because you were a girly spot, and you said maybe. How early are we talking about?
Well, I started university when I was 16, and I guess I finished university when I was 20. I did a couple of degrees. So it was funny, actually. I mean, I have kids myself now. There's actually the point of accelerating your children through, to finish university with 2 degrees when I think I was 19, actually. I mean, what's the point of that stuff, right? It was like really kind of like, I just went out there and got a job in technical support for Panasonic. It was like such a horrible life. But at the same time, it's, I guess that, I was fortunate in my early life in that my parents took me around the world a lot. We lived in the UK. I spent some time in Kenya. It was, I'd travelled a lot by the time I was quite little, and I think that's quite good. Like dealing with lots of people in lots of different countries. I think it's kind of, I think that you have this idea of culture, where culture is sort of people wearing different outfits and eating different kinds of food. But the reality of it is culture is that people in different countries think differently, right? And so I think of a thought, it goes through my kind of cultural filters, it turns into my words and actions, and then it goes into this person's ears and through their cultural filters and turns into a thought in their head. And if you come from different cultures, the thought you start with and the thought they end up with are actually really different things oftentimes. And I think I'd figured that out by the time I was like 7 years old. And I think that was probably quite useful, because that's just the reality of people. And anyone in the technology business has to know how to deal with people from different cultures. That is just a fundamental of building a technology business these days.
Maybe your HR solutions was actually ingrained in you in a really early age.
I don't know. It's fun. I love HR though. I really do. I think that HR is an interesting space. I mean, we ended up in it kind of by accident. I've never admitted to having some passion for human resources, because a passion for human resources is an oxymoron. So the thing to me about that though is that human resources people are not kind of jaded the way that most professionals in business are. So you talk to. I
don't know. Shall we ask? Are you jaded? Yeah? Are you jaded? Do you feel a bit tired and sick with the whales? No, HR's great! HR's still great, okay.
It's fun. It's very fun work. You kind of touch all faces of business. You sit on board meetings.
Yeah.
You talk to all sorts of people.
Yeah, it's really, really true. Yeah. And it's a nice thing. It's like marketing towards HR people. They're not sick of you. Like if you talk to, if you can tell a human resources person something new and something interesting that's happening in the world of managing people, they're generally interested. Whereas you can't tell CTO anything. You just can't. So it's quite good from that perspective. I'm not sure how we got into the topic of talking about HR people.
So current day, you flip between here and California. We know that you love Auckland, and yet you've found yourself being involved in quite a number of different businesses. And I was looking at the list of boards that you sit on. Let's see, of ProMap, Flossie, I thought was a really interesting one. It's basically about nails and hair. How does a man who was originally interested in artificial intelligence and corporate marketing get into the world of manicures and fringes?
It's really simple. Like, I mean, I look, female-oriented businesses are interesting anyway, because I think that certainly one of the things I was interested in is fundamentally, I don't think that businesses marketing towards women on the internet have reached the level that a lot of male-oriented businesses marketing towards men on the internet have reached. I just don't think we have. I think the internet still feels quite male to me. You know, it's getting better, but there's good opportunities there, right? So
But
even if you go
with
to
all the porn that's on there at all, like.
right, well, I mean, so I'm not even going to go down that path. So this feels like entrapment. So
It's a trap. It's a trap.
so if I look at if you look at something like if I go back to my thing before about big markets and obvious pain points, what Flossie is doing is they're going after the Flossie app on my phone. I can sit there and go, hey, I don't know, a Brazilian. I don't specifically want a Brazilian, but I want a Brazilian, and I'm available tomorrow for these 3 hours in the afternoon, and I'm available all of Friday. And these are the parts of town I'm interested in. Go and find me an appointment. And it comes back with a selection of places, and I can go, hey, yeah, that one looks good. I click on the thing, and it's booked, and then I show up. And if you actually had to do that yourself, it's a pain in the ass. Like trying to book a Brazilian. So is it
The back bum or the front bum? I wonder.
Yes. Yeah. So try to book a Brazilian is a pain in the ass. That could be our tagline. That is a good strap line. Thank you for that. But it is difficult, right? It's one of those sort of things where you go like, hey, it's difficult. So it solves a problem. Now it's not a huge problem. It's a very first world problem, but it actually solves a problem. It solves a pain point. But then the next part of it is New Zealand women spend more than $1 billion a year on salons and spas.
God, it's
right?
a massive market. I
Yeah.
didn't realise it was that
So
big.
if you can just take a small part of that $1 billion market, then by solving that pain point, by inserting yourself in the transaction, then it's a good business, right? And so that's the bit that I fundamentally like about that. I mean the other thing I'm interested in is I said there was 4 things, I mentioned 2, which is the market size and the pain point. But the next one is always about business model. You've actually got to have a business model where you go, hey, this is going to be viable. This is going to be a way where you actually can.
How do you
make money.
validate these ideas, though? What process have you experienced or gone through yourself, or you've applied? Because we hear a lot of people still talking about gut feeling.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's got to be an
I'm not really a gut feeling
approach.
kind of guy, unfortunately. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people out there who've got good gut feeling. They make great decisions based on gut feeling, and there's whole books written on how you can make good decisions that way. I think that the thing to me is that when you're looking at the business model stuff's actually pretty obvious. So it really fundamentally boils down to what is the difference between the cost of acquisition of a customer versus the lifetime value of that customer. So how much is it going to cost me to get a new customer versus how much money am I going to make out of that customer over time? And so if you look at something like Sonar 6, our average customer would stay with us, it's a software as a service, they'd pay annually, they'd stay with us for about 7 years. That's what, typically once you implement an HR system, you don't just walk away from it the next day, you tend to stick with it. So our average customer stayed with us for about 7 years. It cost us the equivalent of about 1 year worth of the revenue we get off them to acquire them through marketing, through our sales team, all that sort of stuff. You look at that and you go, well, that's fundamentally a good business, right? It's just fundamentally going to work. If I look at something like Flossie, the cost to acquire a customer is actually very low because it's kind of friend get a friend. People look at your phone. It's like Uber. Someone looks at your phone. Oh, how do you get your taxi? So the cost to acquire is actually relatively low. And then hair keeps growing. So I keep buying stuff and I keep using a system and I use it for a long time.
Keep on going to get more Brazilians.
We only take a small amount of money from each of those transactions, but we keep every Brazilian we're getting some. Until we have Brazilians of dollars.
No!
I was very proud of that.
Fantastic. So, I've never blushed during any of these talks. I'm starting to feel very self-conscious about keeping my legs crossed. Waft. You completely made me forget what I was going to ask you next.
Should we talk about your childhood?
No! Dude. dear God. No, you really have. You've completely swayed. You're awful. You're a terrible, terrible man. Ah, here we go. So what makes you, God, what makes you excited now? You've been acquired. You're part of Cornerstone OnDemand. That's pretty much a huge deal. I'm not suggesting that you're resting on your laurels, on your freshly waxed laurels. But what I am going to ask is, what is driving
You can use IPL instead of wax, so like a laser technology.
Does it not weird you guys out that he knows about this? What makes you excited now? What gets you up in the morning? I know that you're still working on Sonar 6.
So let me firstly, what excites me right at the moment, other than being at Startup Grind in Auckland, is that
Thank you.
I am, courtesy of Generator and Sales Pizza.
Thank you very much.
Is that I only have 3 days left at Cornerstone. So as of the end of the half, which finishes on Monday, then I'm no longer there. So I agreed to be there for a couple of years. I've gone a little bit longer than that, and so I'm out of that now. And so I'm going to just do nothing for a little bit, which excites me. I am interested. I work with NZTE on looking at what we're doing to grow businesses in New Zealand, and working with the government's an interesting thing. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of a nice way of putting it. Like you feel you can make change at an individual level in some businesses, but actually trying to collectively make change at a policy level is actually quite difficult. But difficult challenges are actually quite fun. So and that stuff excites me. It excites me looking at businesses that can grow. I'm sort of in this mode at the moment of I'm involved in a few other businesses which I like. I may become involved in a few more.
You've got $5 million. Where do you invest it?
If I had $5 million, where would I invest it? Yeah, I'd day trade it on zero stock.
You would not.
Yeah, just day trade it.
Not this week.
I think like the end of this week. So if I'd buy some now and sell it next week. It's my stock tip. Look, $5 million is kind of.
It's a nice sum of money for a startup company. It's a nice sum of money for an SME to take their business to the next level. Yeah,
I mean, I think what you find is with investment in businesses, it always goes in phases, right? And so at the very early stage, you got to be kind of careful you don't invest too heavily because you still have to hone the model. So when we started Sonar 6, we took quite limited investment to start with while we kind of worked out exactly what we were doing, exactly what we were trying to build. And we got that into a decent business model and then we kind of accelerated it. And I think it is one of these things that sometimes you find some things just take time. I'm involved in a business at the moment which has been around for nearly 10 years. And it's just starting to hit its straps. And you look at it and you go, wow, this is a really, really great business. But it also looks like something that took 10 years to get there.
Wow.
Just some things are like that. And so some of the cycles are kind of long. So look, I think that you find that there are some businesses that you can invest in and they'll just putting 100K in and spending some time with them will make a really massive difference. Whereas when you get to the point where someone's raising $5 million, hopefully they already have a business model. They already have that stuff sorted. It's just a matter of saying, okay, we understand how this business scales. We understand the unit metrics. Now we're just going to pour petrol on the fire.
And being involved with a number of different businesses as a board member or as an advisory person, what is your key part of advice too? I mean, we've got a room here full of people who are maybe starting out on their own fresh ideas, just thinking about starting a business. Or we've got people here I know who have been at the fire, stoking it for the last 3 to 4 years. What's the Mike Carden piece of advice to take away? Tell us your knowledge.
Look, it varies depending on which phase of business you're at, right? I think with early stage companies, most of the time it's just that you can't steer a ship that's not moving, right? That it's very, very easy to fall into this thing of trying to get it exactly right. I talk to lots of people who go, I really want to start a business, I just haven't thought of an idea. And the reality of it is most businesses just start. There's a good example of a company a long while ago that started off in the late 90s wanting to sell golf equipment online. So that's definitely an example of a business that's far too early for its time, right? So starting a business just to sell golf equipment online in 1998, pretty bad idea, and the business didn't do very well. But at the same time, the guys that had started that they kind of got into the world of golf, right? They got into the world of golf because they had someone from TV who was a golf commentator who was the face of their website that hired these developers, and then the golf guys came along and said, hey, the golf guys from TV, can you guys do some graphics for our golf show? And so it's like, well, our developers aren't doing anything because we're not selling any golf equipment. Maybe we'll put them on that. And those guys went off, and they now have a company that makes, they've been around for a long time. They do all the graphics when you go to when you watch golf, where you see the ball traveling, all that sort of stuff. And it's just a good example of the fact that they wouldn't be in the position if they just hadn't started doing something. And so it's not really necessarily that they had a great idea to start with. It's more that they just kept going.
You said earlier on about the importance of having a business model. Is it also then important to be able to be flexible or to recognise other opportunities that have come along?
I think that's true. I think the thing is that most people who start businesses are naive, right? And certainly when I started Long Coast, which I started before Sonar 6, I was very naive. At the point I started Sonar 6, I still felt I was relatively naive. But that's okay, because naive gives you a false sense of confidence a lot of the time. And if you really looked at the reality of your business, you'd just stop doing it and you'd go and work for telecom, right? So that kind of naivety is actually kind of okay. But you also have to recognise that you have to learn quite quickly. There's lots of things you do need to learn. And certainly, the more times you go through the loop, the more you kind of learn that. And so the idea that you need to have an obvious pain point.
What was your pain point?
Just didn't. The first company I started was a company called Long Coast. I didn't have an obvious pain point, so the company just turned to shit. And that's just the reality of it, right? It's just, and so by the time I got to the second business, I was like, oh, you've got to have something that customers want to buy. That does seem fairly obvious.
What was the
in
first
retrospect.
company? What
I
were
don't
you
want to talk
doing?
about it.
I asked you earlier on if there wasn't anything you wanted to talk about.
But it was like, we had a company and we did, we built a product called Collaborative Customer Asset Management, CCAM for short. And basically what we did is we went after the largest retailers in the world and we said to them, we'll take the data that you have on your customers and we'll manipulate that in an anonymous fashion and we'll sell it back to vendors of consumer durables. So they can understand more about how to build. See, this is quite boring, right? So it suffers from this problem of firstly, the total available market, the largest retailers in the world, there's not very many of them. We've got to try and convince them it's just a bad idea. The second part of it is, look, I'm pretty good at explaining what we did and no one here knows what it is, right? It's just too hard to explain it.
It's too complicated. Who was, apart from yourself and your partner, the most important person or people in Sonar 6 before you sold on? Who's the most important person on your team?
So I guess that there was a guy called Pete Weaver on our team, and he was an operations guy. He's still there, and I think that he's just a phenomenal operations guy. He gets how to build an operation. He's very commercial. He understands that cash has to come in the door, and as little cash as possible has to go out the door, and that kind of just commercial sensibility, I think, is really, really critical. It's one of those things that you can kind of have, you can have a bunch of people in the room who are great at building a business, but they don't actually really, really genuinely understand how you turn that into something commercial that makes money. And so I think Pete was that kind of guy. We had some gifted developers. We had different people like that. There's the guy from Garage Ventures said that when you start a business, you need three kinds of people. You need an optimist, a pessimist, and an engineer. And that's that the optimist is the glass is half full, you've got the glass is half empty, and then you've got the engineer that's going, the glass is the wrong size. And it's kind of true. You need to have this person in your business that's sort of sitting there the whole time just with this critical mind going like, hey, what if we did this differently? What if we did this differently? What if we change this, and so on? Because that's how you kind of grow good business models.
Was the acquisition by Cornerstone always the end goal? Was that your exit strategy in 2-3 days' time?
Was it our exit strategy? Look, I think our shareholders were very happy with that as an exit. I think that you have to ride the cycles of the market. It's just a feature of any of these businesses. And businesses they're long projects. They're sort of, if you can start to finish in 10 years, that's pretty good, right? And so we were at a phase where we either needed to, we had a lot of, where was this? 2012. Human resources software as a service, that segment had become extremely hot, which is I guess, fortunate for us.
Did it become hot because you actually produced something that people were starting to recognise, we need this? Because, I mean, not an awful lot has changed between 2006 and 2012.
So what happened, I think, is that that software as a service as a concept had become well established by 2010, 2011. It was really starting to be well established. But that had become established early in HR, because HR had this background in payroll, and payroll had always kind of been something you'd outsourced.
Yeah.
And so what happened is that the companies who were making human resources software had driven the software as a service model, and they'd become very established in that space. And then the incumbent ERP vendors, people like Oracle and SAP, etc., had suddenly gone like, wow, HR is really ahead of the rest of this curve, which was probably unexpected to a lot of people in the technology world. And so when SAP wanted to get into software as a service, they acquired SuccessFactors, who was a large human resources SaaS player. When Oracle wanted to get in, they acquired Taleo, which was a large human resources SaaS player. So suddenly you had human resources software as a service was a hot category. And because the way that these markets work, what happens is everyone looks at it and goes like, wow, these companies are getting acquired at big multiples. Firstly, lots of acquisitive behaviour goes on, so other people are acquiring other people, but then all the VCs, all the venture people get in and go like, wow, this is a hot category. I'm going to pour my money into growing human resources software as a service companies. And so what that meant for us in Sonar 6 was that we really only had two options. We had the option of taking on board more capital from VCs to grow faster, because all of our competitors suddenly had a whole lot more capital. So small competitors suddenly all had $5 million, $10 million, $15 million more capital than they previously had. Or otherwise, we were going to get acquired, because the large vendors were acquisitive and they were acquiring everyone. And so, our shareholders had been in it for, I guess, some of them for sort of six years by that point, maybe 5 years, and they said, hey, this is a good time to get some liquidity in our investment, and that's how that happened. So I mean, it's not like it was the plan. I think that very few people invest in businesses with a plan of their money never coming out. Though.
Yeah. God, I'd like to meet that kind of person, though, wouldn't you? Here, have some money. Don't need it back. It's all right.
It was an interesting thing for us too, though, because we went down this path of trying to build a cool company in human resources, and in fact, at the time we were acquired, we were touted as being the coolest company in human resources technology, which I've always thought is kind of like being the tallest dwarf, right? It's kind of like we're the coolest company in this really dull category. But it just goes to show you can actually build really great businesses in categories that aren't actually necessarily that interesting. You don't have to be in kind of mobile
What
gaming.
made Sonar 6 so cool? What was, let's say, what are your three buzzwords for Sonar 6 that made such a difference? Why was it such a cool place to work? Why was it so cool in the marketplace?
We hired a couple of people early on in marketing, a person called Karen Rayner and a guy called Kai Crow, who's now at VMob. And those guys really understood demand generation and how you actually build something that people want to be involved in as a brand. And it's quite an interesting thing to me. If you look at if you look at how went to grow the business, we always thought that we'd put our marketing teams in market, and most of our market was in the US, so we assumed we'd put our marketing teams in the US. But we actually found that we could hire better people in New Zealand to do marketing.
You sounded so Kiwi just then.
New Zealand. We could find better people in New Zealand to do marketing, and they would be, they weren't kind of polishing everyone else's stuff.
Turds?
Yeah. What's that? There's. No, I won't get into that. It wasn't so much polishing a turd as rolling it in glitter. But it was it was one of those things where they weren't just kind of looking at everyone else's marketing and doing that. They were just sitting there in New Zealand, coming up with their own way of connecting with customers. And I think that actually did create. We were the guys from New Zealand. It was a really weird thing. I think that we have such a sort of natural cultural cringe in this country to saying, I don't want to go off and talk about how I'm a New Zealand technology company. And talking about being a New Zealand technology company probably is not that interesting. But being from New Zealand is interesting. And I've always had this thing that it's much more important to be memorable than it is to be professional, right? It's
God, don't say that. I've got a boss who wants me to buy him a tank and drive it down Queen Street just for the sheer fact that Generator can do these things. That's not cool.
But it's interesting though, because I'll tell you a story. So we went to this trade show Chicago called the Human Resources Technology Conference.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing show. It's like so cool. And when you go to those trade shows, what happens is that all of the big vendors go there and they all want to outdo each other in the minds of the customers and the minds of the analysts and the minds of the kind of whole village of people that is human resources technology.
It's swinging the biggest cock there, really, isn't it?
Well, to an extent. I wouldn't use that term myself.
No,
but
he wouldn't.
So when you go there, you see like Oracle spend $250,000 on this massive 2-level stand, and this they fly all their execs in because they're releasing a product, and we didn't have $250,000, and so sort of by necessity we got a 10-foot by 10-foot space because that was the largest space we could afford, and instead of building a stand in it, we put a cardboard box in it. And we let people write on the outside of the cardboard box in vivid marker, and we went down this whole path of promoting that we're a software company that exists on the internet, so the worst place to find out about us is at a trade show, hence we've put a cardboard box in. And of course the people from the trade show didn't really like the fact that made a mockery of trade shows apparently. It was I guess amplified by the fact that the trade show people they're fairly new to social media and so on, so they hired a social media consultant who did a lot of tweeting about what was going on, and we found out very early that the social media consultant just retweeted whatever we tweeted with their hashtag. So we'd say, we're setting up the stand, it's going to be amazing, we've got the laser show going, and they'd just be retweeting it, right? And then people would show up and it was a box, a cardboard box with vivid marker on the outside. And so they came along and decided that they wanted us to leave the show, that they didn't want us to be at their show anymore after we'd paid for our stand. And incidentally, putting a cardboard box in a trade show in Chicago is not actually that cheap because it's a very union-controlled city. So the fire department had to sign off on our cardboard box.
No!
So we did spend $500 on getting it signed off. But that all said, they came along, they wanted us to pack up our cardboard box and go back to New Zealand and stop making a mockery of their trade show. And of course, that generated tons and tons of excitement because there was people trying to muscle us out of the show. I remember going back to my marketing guy, to Kai, and saying, I don't know if I'm that comfortable with this idea of the cardboard box and the angry people, and because I just really don't like that sort of. I'm just not naturally like
you're a
that.
lover, not a
I want
fighter,
everyone to
eh?
be nice, and I think he reminded me that if you want to be a disruptor, if you want to, everyone sits here and goes, we're going to be disruptors. We're going to go into this market. We're going to disrupt it. You're going to have to be comfortable with being disruptive, right? Which means you're just going to have to drive your tank down Queen Street. It's just the reality of it.
Okay, before I get myself into any more trouble, Ryan, I didn't say anything about the tank. Just edit that out. Questions from the audience. I hope I've done a good job so far, but yes, go ahead.
You mentioned a little bit about cultural sensitivities in software. Can you talk a little bit more about that, because that's something that is going to influence my job?
Right. Well, what I mean by cultural sensitivity is it's not so much. The reality of it is building a software team in New Zealand, in fact, building one anywhere in the world, is going to be a very diverse team, right? So if I look at our team, we have people from, all across Asia and South Asia particularly. We have people from Europe, Eastern Europe. We've got a lot of different kind of people in there, and I think that the point is that you can't just assume that they all behave like I'll use the example for me is the kind of New Zealanders I went to school with in the 70s. They're just different people, right? They're the New Zealanders that make up New Zealand in 2014. And I think I was really just saying that I'm kind of grateful that I kind of understand that different people think in different ways, because I think it's really, really useful to kind of take that approach to try and manage those sort of diverse teams. I don't have any sort of secret for managing those teams other than just realising that they're not the same as you.
To be fair, you have travelled all the way around the world.
I've been fortunate in that. But
yes.
then again, that's part of being a New Zealander too, though, isn't it? I'm sure most people in this room have travelled a lot. I could be wrong. Might not have.
Go ahead.
Hi, Mike. I'm curious about that starting point of you, software guys, and you're doing HR. So, at what point did you say, hey, we understand this space, or people trust us with this?
Yeah, so at what point did we understand the space? At what point did we say we could understand HR? Look, there's sort of two answers to that. There is the classic fake it till you make it kind of, that happens in software a lot, right? Which is I'm just going to pretend we understand your space is. But I think that it's a really good point. You do actually have to develop customer empathy really, really early. So in any business, you actually have to kind of get to the core of actually what's going to make your buyer want to buy you, right? And that comes from actually just talking to a lot of HR people. So I think that we, the way I've described it internally, the way that we pitch it is that you've got to reach a balance between listening to customers and not listening to customers, because you're actually going out there and trying to create a new world for them. Right? You're trying to create something new that they haven't done before, and so if you ask them about it, they'll tell you about what's wrong with what they currently have, but they won't necessarily think about the kind of future. But at the same time, you really do have to. The fundamental core of business is about desirability, right? You actually have to be desirable. And so I mentioned that when you talk to HR people, they were kind of they weren't jaded. They wanted people to talk to them. Well, they actually wanted to talk to people who were going to be, going to teach them something, who were going to be interesting, who had a way fundamentally of making them cool. And so with due respect to HR people, one of the problems that HR people seem to be facing when we were doing this was that they didn't have enough influence in the organisation considering what they did, and all of the systems and so on that they're involved in were kind of boring. Now, things like payroll and so on. And so we went off and said, hey, our job is to make HR people cool again. And I know again might be an exaggeration, but make HR people cool. And so that's what we did.
Come on, HR kids, come in here. We'll give you new haircuts, put on a bit of lippy,
well,
get yourself a Brazilian.
HR is funny. Yeah, we can combine those two businesses. No, but HR is, we can make a mashup. HR is, though, characterised by kind of, this idea of the HR lady, right? There's this middle-aged lady with like she's wearing capri pants with stockings, and she's carrying like a Coach handbag, and like, and she's got 3 or 4 cats at home, and maybe more, and we were just like, hey, that's not our market. Our market is kind of like these HR people who are connected on social media. They're driving change in their business. They're kind of
they really understand people,
younger and funkier, and they understand the original promise of HR, which is to get the best out of your people. And so we just sort of said, like, if you're being characterised like this, just come over to the good side, and we're going to talk to you like this. And that was, I guess how we.
Basically created a cool gang for the HR kids to hang out in.
The best campaign, I reckon, the most successful campaign we ever did at Sonar 6 was the I Heart HR Ladies campaign, which was just like, just built around that concept of I Heart HR Ladies. And it was just like, just going to turn the whole kind of conversation around.
I might steal a little bit of that. Make a note and say, anybody else? Questions? Hello?
Mike, you started your company in New Zealand, but your markets were mostly overseas, is that right?
Yeah.
If someone's starting a business in New Zealand and they're not kind of tied here for family reasons or anything, in your view, is it better to just stay in New Zealand and then sell anywhere, or is it better to just move to where your market is and set up there?
So should you be present in your market, or should you be located here? I think that's a really, really good question. I think the most important thing is that you don't view yourself as an export business. It's one of the challenges we have as New Zealanders. We kind of view ourselves as export businesses, which is like, we're going to build ourselves a business in New Zealand, we're going to export stuff all over the world. It doesn't matter whether that's kiwi fruit or software, we still view that as an export business. Whereas actually what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to build a global business, and I'm going to make some decisions, which are logical decisions based on where I'm going to put the different components of that. And so you might go, okay, well, what I've decided to do is one of the components of that is development, and I'm going to put that development team in New Zealand. Or you might go, no, I'm going to put that development team in Bangladesh, or I'm going to put that development team on the West Coast. But you make that decision based on whatever makes sense for the business. Likewise, I mentioned the thing on marketing, where we ended up putting our marketing team in New Zealand. That was the last thing we expected to do. But at the same time, we were never going to put our sales team. I wasn't going to put my worldwide sales manager in New Zealand because 70% of my sales were coming out of North America. It was just, the wrong thing to do. So I think that, you should make those decisions with this view of, I'm a global business, and where do those things kind of work. At the same time, too, I don't think we should sort of forget our inherent New Zealand-nish. That's not a word. New Zealand-ishness. And we should, if there's things which actually can make us different by being here, because we're going to think differently, we're going to do something differently, then it's quite cool to do it here. I often think design from New Zealand is great because it's just not as influenced as design from other countries. And so if you were going to build What's Jeremy Moon's business called? It makes Icebreaker. You know, if you're going to build Icebreaker, well, of course, there's lots of elements of that. You go, well, that's kind of a New Zealand kind of business. I'm going to put that here. But yeah, there's lots of parts of that where you go, well, I don't need to do that in New Zealand. I can do that elsewhere.
Anybody else? I mean, you were all so eager earlier on. Or did I cover absolutely everything that you guys wanted me to cover? Because I'm that good.
So how was the transition from Sonosec to
Cornerstone?
So the transition was great. I mean, the thing was that culturally we were quite similar companies. You know, like they were not huge. They were sort of 3 billion in market cap, so reasonably big in that regard, but only about 1,000 staff. So we weren't kind of lost in there. You know, it wasn't like we were being acquired by someone with 100,000 staff. The thing is too that whenever you do these kind of deals, like ultimately everyone says, yeah, we tried to do the right deal for all stakeholders. You know, so we tried to make sure we did the right thing by our staff, and we tried to make sure we did the right thing
staff?
by. I'll come back to that. Okay. By our shareholders and by our customers and so on. And the reality of it is that's how people talk. But actually, what happens is you just do whatever the shareholders want because they're the people who actually ultimately drive it. But we were kind of fortunate, and we ended up doing something that was really good for staff. And so we kept virtually all of our staff. Awesome. For a long time, and in fact we've employed more people in this country, and the office in this country is the office in New Zealand is doing very well, and it's twice the size it was when we were acquired. So
right.
It is doing that, and so I'd like to sit here and go, well, that's because that's what I wanted to happen, but the reality of it was that was kind of we just landed in a fortunate place. We landed in a great company that understood global business, that was had offices all around the world, despite the fact it was small. It wasn't just a sort of US centric company that couldn't understand how to do business outside of the US. It's got offices in multiple different countries doing different things, and so the acquisition was culturally relatively simple. I think that being acquired will always have its challenges. One of the biggest challenges you have is that you build a brand and then you take that brand away. And so if you're a marketer that's kind of spent the last 4 years of your life developing the Sonar 6 brand, and that's how you get your gratification, because you see people out there going, hey, this is a great brand, I love this. And then one day we turn around and we say, okay, well, we're just taking that brand away now. That makes you unhappy.
Yeah.
And so there'll always be some collateral damage. But also some of those marketers stayed around. I mean, one of the things I'm proud of in Sonar 6 is that we developed lots of great people. We've developed lots of great marketers who are starting to kind of spread around the tech community in New Zealand now.
Hang on a second. I've got somebody at the back. I'm going to get to you, grey shirt. Go on at the back, Beady Boy.
I'm actually interested in your failed business.
Do you want to buy it?
So for a lot of us that have or some of us that have started businesses, there has to be a pivot point where you say, actually, this business is not feasible, and I need to cut my losses now before I invest more in this track. For you, what was your pivot point, and how did you find it?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, I think that we, in the previous business, it didn't actually fail outright. It just wasn't growing. It just wasn't doing what we wanted it to do. And interestingly enough, though, the Sonar 6 business, we kind of grew in parallel. So it was kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to start doing something else. It was almost like product diversification. It was almost like we sort of diversified from doing retailer software to doing human resources software. And then at some point, it just became really, really obvious that one of these was way better than the other. And at that point, you just had to make the decision and said, okay, let's just cut this. And so, it wasn't like we said, okay, I'm going to stop this and then I'm going to find something new to do. It was like any sort of thing in business where you're scrambling around trying to make something work. And while you're doing that, you come across something that's better. And so, I still think that if I hadn't started Long Coast or CCAM, there just wouldn't have been the momentum to then start Sonar 6. Just at the simplest level, the staff that, the people I got involved with to help me make Long Coast work are the same people that I started Sonar 6 with. Just at the simplest level, I wouldn't have got those staff. I wouldn't have got involved in that. So I think the important thing, though, is you'll kind of realise it yourself when you go, oh, okay, we've got this wrong.
See, now you're saying you're talking about a gut feeling there.
No, it's not a
No?
gut feeling at all.
No.
It's a million miles from a gut feeling. You're sitting there going like, no one's buying this shit. You know? It's not a gut feeling. It's like no one's buying it.
The numbers are just not. There are no numbers. God
Yeah, I mean,
damn it.
sometimes you can sit there and you can see that you've got pipeline and you can see that you've got prospects and you go, hey, no, this is going to get good. It's just the sales cycle is longer than I expected or something like that. But when you're going to, I mean, basically it worked like this. We ended up with 2 pieces of software. We ended up one which I'd take to retailers and they get kind of tired looking, and I'd take the other one to HR people and they'd be like perky. And so we just ended up in the latter.
Ah, okay, great show, boy.
So how did you get your first 2 or 3 clients?
Yeah, so that is like the proof point in any business, right? I mean, it amazes me in Cornerstone, the company that I'm currently involved in. If I look at their early clients, they're some of the biggest companies in the world, and you go, how did you do that? Yeah, how did you actually do that? How do you take this company which was kind of new and get some great customers early on? And I think that is just purely force of personality. And so we just went out there. Our first customer was Trade Me. We
Had that relationship there already?
No. So actually, the relationship, the reason Sam invested in us is because they were a client.
Okay.
Right? They were a client and they were kind of frustrated with the lack of functionality in the product. And he was like, well, how do we get more functionality? I said, well, we haven't got enough money. And he's like, okay, I've got some money. And that's how that worked.
Sam Morgan saying he's got some money.
Well, it was before Trade Me was acquired, actually.
Oh.
You know? So it was like, I suspect he still had some money. So but that is one of those things where we just knocked on doors and tried to get those customers. I don't know if that's how I do it now though, because like I said, you kind of understand more about things, and I actually think that what I do now, rather than just really knocking on doors and polishing my shoes every day and trying to do that thing, well, actually, I wasn't polishing my shoes. John was polishing his shoes. But rather than doing that, I'd actually probably start by building demand through marketing kind of earlier. Before I'd even finished building the product, I'd try and have like a list of, 1,000 people who are kind of somehow engaged in your sort of, in your prospect nurturing and those sort of things. I think it's better to try and actually hit the marketing earlier rather than hit the sales earlier now.
So would that be a regret or something that you would change, or is there anything else
not a
that you
regret.
think, God, I wish I'd done that differently?
Oh, it's like this. Look, basically, it took us 6 years from commercialising the business to when we were acquired, and possibly we could have done that faster. There's some things where we could have learnt more quickly.
Nostalgia
Yeah,
advice.
but that's just the reality of it. I think that thing of driving a very sales-heavy model early was probably wrong. We added a lot of salespeople. I mean, we made this. I think it's probably a mistake, but I think it's something lots of businesses probably do, which is that we found that from the time that someone found out about Sonar 6 to the time that someone purchased Sonar 6 was like 7 months, and that was killing us. Like it was taking us a long time to get new sales on board, and so we thought that if we added salespeople, we could shorten that sales cycle. So we built up the sales team. And it's just in reality, it's just not a lever you can pull. People actually take 7 months to make a decision, and adding more salespeople. I mean, when was the last time that a salesperson ringing you made you do anything, right? It just, all we do is just irritate the customers, the prospects, by having more salespeople. And we just realised that wasn't a lever you could pull. The only lever you can actually pull is get more people in the funnel, and you can get more people in the funnel by marketing and doing all these sorts of things. And so I think that's something where we learnt that we'd invested too heavily in sales and we should have invested more in marketing. But at the same time, I talked about the way that lots of these things are kind of post-rationalised. I suspect that what actually happened was that I went to a board meeting sometime near the beginning of the global financial crisis and said, hey, look, we're going to run out of money. And they went, okay, we're the most expensive people in the business. We went, oh, sales. And so we got rid of them. I mean, that's probably the reality. I can't really remember, but it was probably much more of a crunch time decision rather than a sort of like well thought out decision. But it taught us a lesson, which is that you can build businesses based on marketing alone.
Anybody else? Hi.
You mentioned earlier on when you were kind of like starting out, you had very limited budget, right? So what was, like, say, if you were giving advice to someone now who's starting out with very limited budget, what would be like the 1 or 2 things that you would really focus your money on?
Right. Yeah, so
So I'm just going to go back and repeat that question. So it's for a young business, where would you focus the limited amount of budget that you actually have? Where would you focus that on?
So I tend to focus it on anything you can do to get a customer, right? And it is an interesting thing to me. I see a lot of businesses, and they have a limited amount of money at the start, and what they're using that to do is they're using it to make the product better and better, because they feel that if the product's better, then suddenly one day customers will show up. And unfortunately, that's not normally the case. The idea that you build a better mousetrap and the world will be a path to your door is a fiction, right? So, I tend to focus what efforts I had on trying to get a customer, and to get more than one customer or as many customers as you can or whatever. And I think that's my sort of 2 cents is that you never really learn how any business models are going to work properly until you have some customers on board. I mean, at the very simplest phase, if I just had a little bit of money to spend on something, I would probably spend it on a tank, which I could drive down Queen Street. That would probably be the specific thing I did.
I would have no marketing budget left if he actually did this. And he wants a really big one too.
Cardboard tank.
Get a cardboard tank. Go and steal Kim.com's inflatable
A
one.
cardboard tank would make a limited impact in this weather.
Then you'd get your Vivids out and write all over the sides. Any other questions? Yes.
How did you get your first employee when you just start up your business? And
Yeah.
also, what did you do in the beginning, 3 months or 6 months after you got your idea, you determined to build a product?
Sure. Okay, I'll answer the second question first, which is how do we get our first employee? And the first employee we added, we had an initial group of 3 people who kind of founded the business, and the first employee we added was in sales. And we identified a sales guy we wanted who we knew would make a difference, and he just didn't want to work for us. And no matter how much we begged him, he didn't want to work for this shitty little startup. And so we instead hired someone else who was terrible. He couldn't speak English, which was a problem because he was a salesperson, and that's not a problem with people who have problems with English. He actually just couldn't speak English, and he was in an English-speaking market, so we had to get rid of him. The piece about that, I guess, that we learnt was that piece of building team outside of your initial group is actually really, really critical, because by adding this guy who was no good right at the start, we went from 3 people who were good to 3 people plus, to 4 people, of which one quarter of us were really bad, right? And it was like, I think that we eventually figured out that, trying to kind of hype up the business to get employees was probably one of the most critical things we could do, of actually trying to build out a plan that said, this is what's going to happen to you if you come here. This is where we're going to go. Actually really change the business a lot. On the other question of what do we do when we first started? Well, we started just writing code. We started because we wanted to have a product, and we wanted to have something we could show people. And so, Mark and I just sat down and started writing code. Once John joined us, John just went out and tried to sell it. That was so you had 2 people building a product and 1 person selling it. I think that ultimately we'd probably change that mix a little if I was to do it again. I think I'd probably spend, like I said, more time in trying to market it. But businesses move at a certain cadence because you're still learning what you're selling. When we launched the product, it was called TMS, which stood for the Talent Management System. And it took us a year before we worked out we were selling performance reviews. We were selling some highfalutin HR speak before that.
Anybody else in the room? Yes.
Where did the name come from?
Sonar 6. I was an available URL.
And there's creativity for you right there.
I mean, I think that we came up with the name Sonar. I think John came up with it because he was reading a book to his kids, and they were looking for the Loch Ness Monster, and they were looking under the surface of the lake using sonar. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's what HR is like. It's like you're looking under the surface of something
for a big green monster that people don't believe in."
The metaphor breaks down, but so we kind of went with sonar, and then you can't turn that into a trademark or do anything with it. But you add a 6 to the end of it, then and it had a certain sibilance to it as well.
Sonar 6. I love alliteration, sonar six.
It's a problem with the New Zealand accent, actually.
Sonar six?
Yeah, well, it sounds to Australians it sounds like you're saying sonar sucks.
Sucks.
Yeah,
It's
like,
rubbish.
and to Americans it sounds like you're saying sonar sex. So
Works in different markets.
yeah.
Anyone else? Are you sure? You're absolutely positive. Anything that you want to say before we wrap up?
I'd just like to thank Sal's Pizza and Generator.
Oh, God
for,
damn you. Don't forget 90 Seconds
and
video.
90 Seconds, of course not. I'd absolutely thank 90 Seconds. What a great company. No, I look, other than to hype up the fact that if anyone needs human resources software, regardless of the size of your
This
business.
is not where you come to plug.
Cornerstone OnDemand makes absolutely sensational
Hang on a
learning
second, where are we?
management
Wednesday.
systems.
So you finish on Friday. What are you
I
going to
finish
do
on
the week-
Monday.
on the Monday?
What am I going to do on Monday?
What are you going to do?
Well, on Monday I'm going for lunch, but on Tuesday I have absolutely no agenda. I think it's important. Like I said, it's been since when I sat down with Mark in a leaky building in Nelson Street and started writing code, to next Monday, that will have been exactly a decade.
Wow.
And I think this is the thing that people forget. It took us 1.5 years before we commercialised it. It took us 6 years to grow it. It took us 2 years post-acquisition for me to kind of exit it. It's a big period of my life, right? And so, to an extent, I think I'm ready to have a break. Take a few months off. Maybe go to Italy or France or somewhere, Hawara.
Somewhere with culture.
Yeah, so somewhere that's not raining primarily, and so, but at the same time, I don't really have, like I said, I don't really have an agenda. So it's not like I'm sitting here going, okay, well, on Tuesday I'm going to start on my next project. I'm really going to actually try and let my brain settle down for a little bit, and I've got some fun things I'm involved in, across VMob and Flossy and ProMap, which keep me interested.
Well, I think that you thoroughly deserve it. And I think that it's been an incredible story to hear for the last 10 years, from a leaky building in Nelson Street to resting on your freshly waxed laurels. You have been an incredible Startup Grind guest. And thank you so much for coming to share your story. And thank you, everybody, for coming out this evening.